And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska aviation weather outlook on this Monday, February 10th, 2025. And we're going to start up just kind of setting the synoptic situation. As of this Monday, mid-late morning, there is a large high-pressure system over northwest Canada, a 1053 millibar high. Meanwhile, we have a storm force 940 millibar low coming up into the western Aleutians. So the pressure gradient between these two systems is very strong. We do have strong winds across the Bering Sea along the southwest coast down through the Aleutians. And there's this frontal system. So when you have that situation, winds ahead of it, east-southeast turning southerly, and there is a high wind warning in effect for the lower Yukon area where winds could gust as high as 60 miles an hour as that frontal system moves on in. Of course, when you have a front like that coming in for this Monday night and a Tuesday morning, that's going to bring turbulence as well as low-level wind shear and some precipitation. We have areas of IFR out over the central northern Bering down through St. Matthew, Nunavik Island, and then especially along the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, with that southeasterly moist and warmer flow. Temperatures as of this Monday, later morning, are around or above 40 degrees, Bristol, Kuskokwim Bays, and then extending down along the Alaska Peninsula and into the Aleutians. And we find Tuesday morning, those IFR conditions coming up along the YK deltas, including Nunavik Island up to St. Lawrence, and then down here along the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, pockets of IFR extending up through Shelikof Strait, east side of Kodiak Island. But again, that big high lends toward VFR conditions across all of the Panhandle, northeastern Gulf Coast, in through much of the interior. And for Wednesday morning, we continue to find with this pattern in place, the front is not moving very quickly, so it's just kind of laid out across the southwest coast. So areas here still will find themselves in IFR conditions come Wednesday morning. St. Lawrence down along the YK deltas and into especially the Pacific side of the Alaska range. Maybe a little pocket of IFR conditions there just inland from Kaktovik. And as we go into Wednesday afternoon, generally we expect VFR conditions to hold across the Panhandle, up through the southern, central, eastern interior. So much of the mainland is high, still having influence, with most of the IFR conditions confined out over the Bering from St. Lawrence down through St. Matthew to just southwest of Nunavik Island, including St. Paul. And looking at passes here coming up for Tuesday, up there in the Brooks Range, as I said, VFR conditions, Anaktuvik and Adigan passes. Down along the west arm of the Alaska Range, there might be a brief morning period of MVFR conditions at Lake Clark, but further north as you round up along the west side and into the central Alaska Range, VFR will be the rule through Rainy Pass as well as Windy Pass on Tuesday. And as we go further east, Isabel Pass through Mentasta Pass will also see VFR conditions, as will the Copper River Basin dropping through there, Tanita Pass, and then Portage Pass, generally VFR conditions through the pass in the west entrance, but on the east entrance there could be a period of MVFR conditions, especially in the morning, and then again across much of the Panhandle, VFR conditions will prevail, certainly there in the north end at Chilkoot and White. Now, freezing levels aloft, we do see a rise above 2,000 and 4,000 feet here across the Alaska Peninsula into the North Pacific there, pretty much southeast of Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, and eventually back up to 6,000 feet. For the interior, freezing levels do bump upwards above 4,000 feet in areas of the southwest and western interior, and as high as 6,000 feet as we get toward areas out toward the 40-mile Gold Country and just south there of the upper Yukon. So there is some warmer air aloft. It's all associated with that frontal boundary that's arcing like this, attached to that very deep low out in the western Aleutians. And we find the potential for some lighter to moderate icing. Certainly a best chance of moderate icing in precipitation-bearing cloud. Have a little more vertical depth, so above 6,000 feet out here over the Bering and areas of the southwest inland from, say, Bristol Bay, Wood-Tikchik State Park, and areas here along and southeast of Kodiak Island above 8,000 feet, where those freezing levels aloft are a little higher. Jet stream level winds over the mainland fairly quiet. As you get out to central Canada, northern Canada, there is a north-northwest jet core, 95 to 105 knots. And then this one more southerly, southeasterly, pulling back toward the Asian continent, upwards of 110, 115 knots. As we bring it down to 9,000 feet, 700 millibars, strongest winds running a belt along this frontal boundary from the lower Gulf out across Kodiak Island in through the southwest interior up through Norton Sound, especially south ends and western end of the Seward Peninsula, vicinity, say, of Nome and Teller. So at 9,000 feet, winds are southerly there, 50, 55 knots, and then locally above 60 and 70 knots here in eastern Asia, back there towards Siberia. And then for Tuesday at 3,000 feet, we find a core of strong winds, 45 to 55 knots just south of the Gulf. That southeasterly flow ahead of this front, and that eventually turns more southerly. And some of the strongest winds coming across this lower southwest arm of the Alaska Range around Lake Iliamna. And again, up to the north there, Tikchik Park, up through the southwest interior across the Kuskokwim and lower portions of the Yukon River, locally anywhere from 45 to high as 60 knot southeast to south winds. And then there are pretty strong core of winds back toward Kamchatka Peninsula into eastern Asia of 50 to 65 knots. So, of course, greatest threat for turbulence on Tuesday will continue to be areas of the west, southwest mainland and coastal areas. And we do have that band of stronger winds. There could be isolated severe turbulence from around Lake Iliamna on up into the lower Yukon Delta as you get inland from the coast, surface to 4,000 feet, along with the threat of low-level wind shear in the vicinity of that front. And we find moderate turbulence across much of the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, and then continuing back out through the central and especially the far western Aleutians.